What is up, everybody? Got an announcement here. I am not going to be uploading videos to YouTube for a while. I'm working on another project that has to do with trading and videos, and it's going to take me a while to put together. And honestly, these little uploads that I do on here, even though it's from a pre-recorded session, they do take a while. I sit here for an hour talking about it, and then I have to come back and review it to make sure that the audio doesn't cut out. So I'll spend maybe another hour looking through it, and then I can spend a large amount of time putting in tags and fucking around with my thumbnails or whatever. So these things can take about 2.5 hours for one of these videos. And I just need to utilize that time elsewhere right now. So I'm going to be working on another project. I've already started it. And I just realized, I just don't have the time to do all this shit. And that project's a little more important. I mean, I'm not going to give out any details on it. It's still in its infant stage. But I'm trying to get this thing done. So I have to stop doing this for a little bit. If something really juicy comes up in the markets or whatever, I feel I need to share here, I'll do that. But for the most part, it's going to slow down for a little bit. Still going to be trading and all that, and I got to focus on, that's like the number one priority. So just want to give you guys a heads up, but here's a little gift, I guess. This is some nice trades. I'm going to share with you 3 trades from Friday, April 24th. And this is some pretty good stuff. Unfortunately, it's in 720. I promise I'll fix that here in the future. So let's go ahead and jump in the first trade. This particular setup here, notice how tight this is. So if you ever see the price action get real tight like this, and then you notice the retail tape is moving at a very high pace, and the price isn't moving, the price action is getting stuck in this small tight range like this, typically you're having retail guys get trapped. And this is a good way to identify when they may get stopped out. This wasn't the best stop out scenario. This also had some interesting things happening. So notice that my retail, and again, this was a low volume afternoon. Typically Fridays are lower volume, but this Friday was, it just wasn't nearly as exciting as Thursday afternoon the previous day. So notice that my mid-size orders aren't really coming in. We got this 220 up here, kind of hold the market down. Man, I really thought I did this in 1080. So you got all these nice little retail orders coming in. It's not flowing in as fast as I would like, but we're stuck in this real tight deal right here. And then you see this 252 bid coming out of nowhere. And the market's just not getting up there. It's not even testing that size, but all your retail orders coming in. And you got retail orders on both sides of the deal. You got short orders coming in. Yeah, you got mid-sized guys coming in as well. Typically, when I'm looking for stops to go off, I want this to move a lot quicker than it is now. But this is actually being trapped on both ends. And you can see it's coming down, and this bid's holding it up. And this is all-time, well, it's not all-time. It's a high of day right here that we had came up and failed. So I start to notice this, and I'm like, man, this is going on far too long, and I'm just going to straddle the deal. So I'm going to go both long or short, depending on which way this thing goes. Because the context of this thing is like we put this high in, and it was sort of a volume spike and immediate rejection. And typically you'll see this type of deal when a top is put in, or at least a temporary top, and then usually you'll have a nice pullback. So just the way this thing's been trading, I'm like, it could go down, or we could put in a slightly higher high. It really depends. As you can see, you have a block order that cleared out that 20 even. Gets me in there. Pulled back on me. I didn't expect that. I'm watching the tape, trying to cover the trade, making sure mid-sized sells don't go against me. And now your volume is picking up substantially. A little jump there. And it wasn't quite the pop I was looking for. And again, typically you'll see these small squeeze zones, and you want to see the retail tape moving rapidly. And typically you can find stops being triggered like that. Depending on where they happen on the volume profile, or where they happen, like is there resting size a few ticks above it or below it. It really depends where it's happening. You don't want to not necessarily take a trade off that all the time. At least I don't. So I canceled off the order that was there that I was going to target out of, because I'm like, there's a high probability just going to put in a higher high. This is a second go. Volume's decent. We're banging into it with a lot of velocity. You do have size every other tick, which typically means it's going to fail relatively quickly. And as you can see, it blew through and immediately dropped back down. And it didn't even blow through here with that much size, and then it's just failing. And that's just a solid defense when you have size every other tick, and then it just sort of falls off. So at this point, I'm like, this is probably it. You know what I mean? I got my higher high here, and this is just looks like a topping pattern. However, usually with a topping pattern, I want to see some block orders come in and shove it. That just didn't happen. The volume wasn't that spectacular, so this day is a little bit different to trade than, say, Thursday afternoon. So now we're kind of doing this chop sideways. Here's what's interesting. And this is actually where I do a reversal. So I hit a reversal trade up in here, and I do get stopped out on the first deal, but I end up reversing it, and I'll explain why I reversed it. Reversing can be very tricky, and it can be very expensive, and it's not always a good idea to reverse your trades. You have to do it at the right spot, and reversals, you just need to be careful with them, because you can get whipped out on them pretty badly. But it all depends on the context of the deal. So, and we kind of have a nice distribution curve sort of setting up. You got all these fucking low nodes down here. You can see in here. That's going to come into play here in a bit. Because you're about to see some really fucking nice trades. Market spread there a little bit. That was interesting. So I'm like, shit. This is going for it for the third time. And typically, when this happens on the third go, it usually goes. But again, the context is lower than normal volume. So I'm like, I'm going to get on top of it. And I did make a mistake. I should never went one tick above this, because it could possibly go up one tick and then roll over. It's what I call a top tick turnover. It's just this thing I see all the time happen, where you have a pivot and then it comes through by a tick or two and then it rolls back over. But the thing is, in this particular example, I'm like, this third go at this thing, it's probably going to pop. You have some nice mid-size orders coming in. It's only 130 right here. It's only 179. And it just pops through and it immediately just doesn't do shit. I'm still just seeing retail orders come in. Nothing significant on the mid-size. And now this shit's pumping up here. Pulled a little bit. Got tested and rejected. Now it's fallen on mid-sized sells. I should have gotten out a little bit earlier. This is an emergency stop, and I don't like to ride the trades out to that area, but sometimes I just either lock up or freeze up, or I just can't react quick enough. Typically, I'm looking for something like this to print to confirm getting out of the trade. I just didn't react quick enough in this particular example. Sometimes it'll just fly down on pure retail, and that's what the emergency stops for. So, I see this blue 20 come in. I'm like, okay, this might go up. But in reality, it's over with. Everything that just happened up there is screaming, that's done with. But this is not a typical thing I see. The way this thing is trading, it's not something I typically see. Now, there are days where you have these slow, grindy uptrends. Those are very painful and difficult to trade as a scalper. So what happens is I put in 2 there. It didn't work, so I tried to reverse it there, and what I'm doing is I'm reversing it here. So I'm like, this is a top tick turnover. And if I look at this, if I look at the bottom here, which is at 1975, and then I look at the top here at 2250, where's the midpoint in here? 2125. So I'm looking for the midpoint on these little ranges. And again, this was on a 7-second chart to let you know. You guys have been seeing me trade either on 1 second, or lately it's been 4-second charts. Now I'm up to a 7-second chart, and typically when volume is slowing down, I scale up the chart a little bit. So the midpoint is at 2150, and as you can see, the market came up, put in this pivot here, and if you watch my hitting double homers video, this sort of same pattern happens on a bigger scale. This is the same pattern I use for everything, and it's just happening to pan out here, and it's on a smaller scaled version. So it ended up, coming down pretty hard right here, and then it popped up at this midpoint, 25.50. We put in a low, came up just above it by a tick, and then it rolled back in. That's sort of a top tick turnover. And usually I'd want to see a top tick turnover down here. Just didn't do that. But I know that this is the midpoint, and I know that there's a high probability this thing's going to go down now and fail. I wanted to see the market fail right around here. It didn't do it. So it came up here. I'm like, okay, the market should fail again. At this point, it just didn't do it. It went for it for a 3rd time, and that's just something I don't normally see. But if I take a step back, I know that this pattern, I know what this pattern is. This little range pattern, which you're only going to see on, a smaller time frame second chart. So I go for the reversal here. I think this goes against me 3. Could have been a little better on the entry. Now you got these buy mid-size orders coming in. Now notice the tape actually stalled out and just slowed down completely. But the thing is, buyers aren't being aggressive. Not even retail is trying to get it back up at this point. And that's something I'm taking into account by watching the time in sales. It's like, buy retail just isn't here. And just seeing how weak they are every time we get up here, they're just not here. And sellers are eventually going to take advantage of that shit. And this is the 3rd time, so now you're going to have stops eventually stacking up on the long end somewhere. So this thing, there's a point where my cat sits on my macro pad and the whole fucking DOM disappears. That was a little scary. She's real fat. So there you go. There's some stops puking out. So you get that nice little push down right there. You know, you had retail buyers there, but really you need large buyers to breach these levels, and they're just not there. I'm not seeing blocks come in. So I'm taking that into account when I make these decisions. Like, there's no blocks that were really coming in at all. Oops, let's fucking make that big again. So this 1850 is actually quite interesting. You got all these low nodes down here. You got this 215 here, and it kind of just came out of nowhere, and it did. This is where we were getting that trapping shit, and it decided to stay there. Again, this is a low-noded area, so I know that, you know, this could possibly bounce here, but at the same time, I know that there's a high probability it's going to breach this zone, because I'm looking at the same sort of pattern again. I call it the Z pattern, when you put in like a higher high by a tick or two and it rolls back over like this. This is the Z pattern, and there's multiple ways to play it, and depending on how I play it, there's different names for my approaches. But I know with these low-noded areas, there's a high probability we're going to go through it. This 1850 just looks prime. Got a lot of large mid-size selling going on. Buyers aren't really stepping up right here. They are a little bit. Getting some absorption going on at that 19. So somebody's still interested in this level. And you can see how significant the absorbing was in this area. Some of this had to do with what happened over here. But if you look at the footprint, there ain't shit on the sell side right in here. This is all buy orders right here. This 180 was only 180 buy orders. So right there, just how thin that footprint is, and seeing this, it just makes sense. It's going to go through pretty quickly there. And, you know, you got this larger bid there, and there's definitely some stops under it. Just the planets are aligning with themselves here on this deal. We get through it pretty good. Buyers are not being aggressive enough. Yes, there's a lot of absorbing going on in here, but buyers are just, now they're starting to get a little more aggressive, but they're not making any progress on this deal. And I want to say this thing fucking rotates up somewhere in here. And what I'm trying to do with this particular deal is, I call this the 80%er. There's an 80% probability when you get the Z pattern, it goes to the other side. And it did that, but I'm holding it longer just because of this low-noded area, and I'm hoping to catch, I'm hoping to get out maybe somewhere down here in the 18s. Quite a bit of gnarly absorption, and this footprint's getting pretty stout, and it's going to be harder to get away from that. I know there's a bounce in here. I mean, these are low nodes. And this thing does pan out for a while. See, this is where the cat fucked everything up. Yeah, so we end up shooting down into there. I hold this deal a little bit longer, and it comes back up onto me, but I know that it's going to rotate right where I got in, because this is sort of this midpoint. But at the same time, this is kind of like the Z pattern on the bottom half. The thing is, when you do get that lower low or higher high for the second go after the 80% move, you're not going to get a second push to the other side. It's very rare that happens. So I know that there's a high probability it's going to roll over on the center point, which it ends up doing. Theoretically, I should have took it off down there, but we just didn't get through there. So I hold the deal longer. It literally comes up underneath me, and it rotates like I expected it to. Again, this is sort of a midpoint area up in here. And now, so you do have this smaller little pattern up in here, and the midpoint was right up here. Now you have this bigger pattern playing out, and it's the same sort of concept. You still have a midpoint right here, but we've auctioned above that midpoint so many times for so long. Well, really, we didn't really auction up here for that long, but it's time to revisit the lows, and that's what it's doing. And again, the buying pressure wasn't up there. We bounce off this. Everything makes sense. So I'll just go fast forward. Okay, I exit right up in there. So I'll show you where I exit. This is the problem here. Is this 1650 sort of a high volume edge right up this next to this 1675. So now it's getting wild, bouncing real hard. Where did I get out of this thing? I believe it comes back down again. I'm like, well, shit, it got through the low nodes. It did bounce off that high volume edge, but it's stalling up right here so much that I'm considering getting out of this deal. See, and it's just flipping up real aggressively once it gets to the 1650-75 area. So I decide to get out, I think right here. Yeah. And that was worth 175. I did get stopped out earlier for 62.50. That other little play with where I took the trade in here was worth 75. So, Now, this is something gets interesting here. So we start to chop right here, and we start to what was that trade? I lose 2 ticks on this one. I think I get into it because we breach, and I decide to get out, try to get out somewhere in here. It was a 2-tick loss. Let's see how I manage this one. $27, that's good sign, but then this 29 comes in, and then that, yeah, that's why I get out, because you just have so much more mid-size printing in. So I just take it off because of how these mid-sizes were printing. So that's kind of how I manage the deal. I don't let it right up to the stop. Good thing I got out, too. I mean, for $25, a 2-tick loss on that. But I mean, I'm like, dude, we got through this low noted area. We should have some sort of downside to at least 1475, and it just didn't work. It wasn't the most prime setup. It wasn't really that good of a trade by any means. But this next fucking trade is awesome. So, I'm like, dude, after we put in that top, this should be it, But then again, this is sort of a midpoint where you can see, same concept. Remember I was talking about stops getting trapped? You can see how it happened in here, and then it zipped up right there. But at the same time, you had size sort of sitting here. But look at how this thing's moving up and just watch the tape on this deal. Going for it here. Just sort of stalling out. Not exactly sure what to do, and now it's starting to backfill all this low noted area, which that tends to happen. You sort of have these two distribution zones, one up here and one down here. Now it's filling all this shit in. So I'm patiently waiting on this deal. And sellers just aren't there for down here. So buyers are clearly interested in this level or these levels. So, I mean, that's how you can kind of spot what's going on. It kind of puts in like how it put in this triple higher highs thing. It's doing the same thing on the low end of it. It's doing like a lower low with a lower low. And it's almost like putting in the Z pattern on this side, and this is where we sort of get that 80% push. And also my midpoint up here got rejected on a decent pullback. So I do look at these pivots if they're good enough for a particular play. Mid-sized buyers coming in. They're just really going up quite a bit. A lot of retail's kind of pushing it up too. And look how it's just stalling on nothing. There's just like straight up stalling where the tape doesn't even move for like a second or two. Like, that's how you know the whole deal is low volume. Just fast and furious quick scalps are definitely more difficult to get in this sort of environment. I think I'm screenshotting the deal. Yeah. Because I'm talking about this pivot up here. Now check this shit out. This is what keyed me off to take this trade. This is pure tape. Watch the tape here. See how all these mid sizes are cranking in, and we're coming up very quickly. We're coming up very quickly. You got some nice retail sellers about to get stopped out. Look at this 21 even right here. This is the pivot point. I know this is the pivot point. With the way that tape, just that velocity on that move and the way these mid-sized blues are printing in, it's like, holy shit, we're going to go for highs again. And it is kind of back and forth stalling here and a little slow to get the mouse up there. I didn't want this to be some sort of top tick turnover, so I'm glad I clicked it after it back printed some. There it goes. More mid-sized blues coming in. And these two mid-sized cells tried to go in and didn't go back down. So that's a good sign. They're trying it again with that 70 to 26. No progress. And you do have some retail just propping this deal up. Nice little block jumping it. So it's good to see that come in. Stalling quite a bit, but I know we're going to test this shit again. Like, I know that there's a high probability we're going to test at 23. A little bit of a pullback onto my entry, and the thing about it is it could do this. It could have that nice little flow up and then come back and chop on 21, then go. That's a typical thing I do see at times, but this isn't like, that's more so on major points of controls or VPOCs is when you see that sort of thing happen, and this isn't really that major of a level yet. It's still developing. And your mid-size blue, your mid-size buyers are all about this shit. Like, clearly the buying pressure is still pretty strong. And that's sort of an 80%er on a bigger grand scheme of it. I mean, here's a 180%er. You know, you got the top tick turnover, 80%. You're sort of getting the same deal down here. But I also know, you know, this thing's going for it. Now you got sellers really stepping up. And what was nice is now we're starting to see block orders. We're starting to see more block orders come in. Sellers really trying there. And they're not making progress. Retail's about it. So, yes, retail can get trapped and stopped out, but if retail wants to push it in a particular direction and they're strong enough, these mid-sized sellers are going to have a hard time dealing with that. So we have retail buyers and mid-sized buyers just very strong compared to the sellers. Oh, did I get out of that? That one was worth 137.50. Didn't even go against me. Yeah, and with the way this thing was stalling and stuff, I did notice that there was a large increase in selling up here. So, I mean, I did take that into account to make the exit. I was hoping I could get up on that 24.75, but sometimes it just falls short of those levels, and then you have this 200 offer starting to step up. So, sellers are still strong up here. Their defense has just been pushed back a little bit. And, I mean, I did take profits in a very appropriate spot, so with the way that there's more red flipping in on the mid-size sell, that's what keyed me off that, you know, this is over with. And I didn't expect much more of a push up from here. Just sort of a weird afternoon with the way everything set it up. It eventually kept going up and doing this shit. And just trading days like that can be hard. Low volume with a little grindy uptrend can be pretty difficult. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed those trades I shared with you there. I am out of here.